Are you ready to learn the 3 secrets to launching a successful podcast? Hi, I'm Bill, a recent client of the Podcast Mogul. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but aren't sure where to begin, he's got you covered. He is hosting a free webinar where he will share the 3 secrets that can help you launch, grow, and monetize your podcast without any fancy equipment or technical headaches. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot now and let him help get your podcast off the ground.
Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Welcome back to another engaging episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and today we have a guest who brings decades of experience, insightful stories, and a wealth of knowledge to the world of digital marketing. Our guest is a marketing professional with over 4 decades of high-level experience in marketing and advertising. Since 2010, our guest has been helping his clients grow their business through digital marketing. His impressive roster of clients include major brands like Sprint, Apple, Wells Fargo Online Bank, Nestle, and of course, Toyota, all of whom have benefited from his practical, no-nonsense approach. He's not just a marketing expert, he's also a master storytelling. His valuable and entertaining stories combined with his humor and good-natured approach make the complex of marketing both fun and practical. But what sets our guest apart is his unwavering focus on what truly matters, creating value for customers and businesses alike. In today's episode, he will share some of his most memorable experiences, the lessons he's learned all throughout his career, and actionable insight on how to leverage digital marketing to create lasting value. So whether you're a seasoned marketer or just starting out, this conversation is sure to provide you with some inspirational and practical advice. So please get ready to learn from one of the best in the business and welcome James Hipkin. James, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Phil, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so looking forward to chatting with you about this, investing in yourself and how digital marketing can be used in a way that's not overwhelming and confusing.
I love it. And I'm going to just jump right into it. Why did you become a digital entrepreneur? Like, what made you decide, hey, I'm going to leave, safety and comfort to become an entrepreneur?
We talked about this a little bit in the green room beforehand, and the reality is I've been an entrepreneur from the very beginning. I was an entrepreneur even inside the corporate world.
Interesting.
And I think it's more a function of, it's a choice. You've got to, first of all, have no fear, which some people might say is you've got to be foolish, but
true.
I started my career in the Toronto office of a New York ad agency, very conservative blue chip ad agency working with consumer packaged goods brands and Dentyne gum and things, Energizer batteries and things like that. And then an opportunity came up we need somebody to go to South America to work with Pillsbury to launch Green Giant canned vegetables in Latin America. Would you be, leave your safe cocoon in Toronto and head off to South America as a Canadian who spoke not one word of Spanish? Sure.
Got to see the world.
That's entrepreneurship. That's the willingness to see an opportunity and take the step. And the rest of it, it's, good humor, goodwill, and, following through, not being afraid. But even in the corporate world, my career in advertising took me to 4 different countries on 3 different continents. After South America, my newlywed wife informed me, and remember, this was back in the 1990s, so pre-internet and the rest of it. And she said, if you want to have a family, it can't be done by fax. Because I was gone for weeks at a time, because South America is a really big place. And so we got transferred to Madrid, Spain. And in Madrid, I was working with Rover Cars. I wasn't doing advertising. They said, look, we need somebody to help Rover Cars build a pan-European database marketing system. And I'm like, well, gosh, I don't know anything about cars, car marketing. I don't know anything about databases. And you're talking about, this is software, right? Yep. Cool. Let's do it. I was working in a corporate environment, but it was still entrepreneurship. So I really think it's about mindset more than anything else. It's about making the choice that you're going to be an entrepreneur. And when you make that choice, the opportunities pop up because you're willing to see it. I talk about this a lot in marketing right now. One of the key things that I have, what I refer to as the world's most boring slide. When I'm talking about the non-icky marketing funnel, I have a slide that's becoming a little infamous. It's a big white screen with a big gray blob in it. That's the slide, right? Mm-hmm. And folks, this is the world from the point of view of your customer. It's just digital noise. It's just gray blob. If you want to be heard and seen, you've got to be able to break through by resonating with what they're talking about. Well, same thing with entrepreneurship. If you're in a corporate environment and your mindset is, I am going to be entrepreneurial, suddenly those opportunities pop out of the gray and become apparent to you. They were always there, but now you're seeing them.
I love that. That's, my God, already 5 minutes in and you're breaking my brain, James. I think that slide probably broke a lot of people's brains by the way you explained it. With your, you went from South America, your safety in Toronto to South America to Madrid, doing things that you have no experience pretty much in, but you were an entrepreneur. You just said yes, which I think is the foundation of an entrepreneur, is just saying yes to things. And figuring it out as you go. Were you at any point worried or scared? Because I know when I started my entrepreneurial journey, there was a lot of this little voice in the back of my head that was saying, you can't do it. This is not you. Go safe, play safe, color in the lines. When you were doing this in every step of your way over the last 4 decades, how did you combat that voice or the negativity that may have arisen?
That's an interesting question, and I'm going to try to answer it in perhaps a non-traditional way. The other bit of my background is I was a performing musician all through high school and graduated from college with a music degree. Performing on stages was something I've been doing since a very early age. And when you spend time performing on stages, particularly I was classical music, so it was in an orchestral situation, you suddenly realize, I had a solo that I needed to do, and I hit a wrong note, and I got a little freaked out by that. But after the performance was over, and I was talking to people, and nobody mentioned the wrong note. And then I started hearing other people hit wrong notes, and nobody said anything about it. And the reality is, if you start to realize that the mistakes you're making are mistakes that you may see, but they're not necessarily life-changing mistakes. One of my little sayings that I use, because right now my business designs and builds websites, and websites are software and they're complicated, and the internet's a mess and stuff breaks, right? Mm-hmm. We'll get frantic phone calls from a client because their website disappeared, and they'll be very upset and very angry, and I'll say, okay, so have any puppies died? And that always stops them. No. Great. It's software. Things break. We'll figure out what broke. We'll fix it. Nobody will remember in 24 hours. Having that grounding in knowing that mistakes happen, and in the general scheme of things, that's a natural course, and no puppies will die. So have I made mistakes? Absolutely. Tons of them. Have I been frightened? Yep. for sure. But I've always kept that thought in the back of my head that, as bad as this can be, in 24 hours, most people will have forgotten.
That is a great philosophy to have, not just in business, but in life in general. Realizing that 24 hours, things can be changed dramatically, and some will remember, some won't. That's going to be something I'm going to be trying to more implement into my life, because it's a very valuable insight.
It'll help keep you sane, because otherwise you just go, because it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Crap going on. There's so many things are outside. And the other thing that you learn is that, fix the things you can control, and you don't ignore what you can't control. Be aware of it, but recognize that you can't control it.
It's true. You can't control everything, but you can control what you can control.
Yeah.
And it's better to focus on that than focus on what you can't control.
That's right.
So already this episode is going to be, I can feel, going to be filled with wise wisdom, obviously with your 4 decades of experience in both entrepreneurial and in the world of marketing.
4 decades at making a ton of mistakes
I don't think it
comes in handy.
It's your first attempt in learning. That's what I look at as a mistake, or failures, quote unquote, if you will. You're learning to fall forward. You're learning what works, what doesn't work. And speaking of that, do you have maybe a story or a piece of advice for people, or more of a story about where you faced something that could be considered a huge problem that you were able to solve with your mindset, and how do you went about solving that issue?
Sure. It's kind of a trite little story, but there's some underlying things in it that I think matter. Working with large corporations, there's lots of personalities involved, and I had a big team. I was one of the executive vice presidents at an agency in Chicago, and one of our junior account executives was getting very frustrated with her client counterpart and expressed her frustration in an email that she was intending to forward to her friend. Unfortunately, in the classic, she hit reply all rather than forward. And next thing you know, she's sitting in my office with, my direct report, and I got a corner office, and the chairman of the agency's in my office all the time, and people get all these like perceptions, and she's just ashen. She's gray. She knows she's going to be fired, right? So we talked about what happened, and we talked about why this wasn't a wise thing to do, and we talked about clients and frustration and people and personality, and finally I said, so her name was Sheila. I said, so Sheila, are you ever going to do this again? And she's like, no. Have you learned something from this? Yes. Says, great, carry on. Now, what Sheila didn't know is that I'd had like 4 different clients had called me prior to this meeting to tell me about this email. And the general consensus amongst my clients who called me to tell me about the email was that Sheila was right. This woman isn't.
A special individual.
Special individual. There you go. But I guess many people might have done exactly what she was expecting to do in that circumstance, but I felt like this was a young person who made a mistake, and we all make mistakes, and I didn't think that anybody was going to remember this in 24 hours. And you know what? She is now a highly respected chief marketing officer with a major company in Silicon Valley.
I love how you took a situation that really had mud on the person's face, and instead of doing what most people would think of, just like you effed up, you're out the door, you insulted one of our clients, this and that, other people hurt, you looked at it as an opportunity to help this individual become a better version of themselves and understand why, one, writing an email and then sending it to your friend is probably best to do it on your personal email and not the corporate email. But also how they took that lesson and probably that kindness that you showed them to help them in their career going forward when they do have a situation where one of their subordinates may have made a simple mistake, a lapse of judgment, and to show that compassion instead of brutality.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's perspective is an important thing, and it's a rare thing, I find, but perspective is a valuable thing. And the other thing that's really valuable is patience. You know, to be successful as an entrepreneur, it's finding the balance between being a hard driver who's willing to take risks and being patient in letting things come to fruition at their own pace. Those are two very conflicting concepts, but everything in life is a teeter-totter. It's all about balance and recognizing that both of these things are important is going to lead you to a lot more success than all of one or all of the other.
I'm curious, when did you, specifically about that saying, like you're either waiting for something to come to fruition or you're trying to make something come to fruition, when did you come to adapt that as a mentality of yours?
I'm not quite sure when it happened. It was always my instinct. Another way of talking about the same thing is, be curious. Curious people are, oddly enough, patient people because they're willing to wait to see what happens because they're curious. I had a situation, I was working on the Energizer batteries business, and I was looking at the sales numbers. Okay. And then I was looking at the research work and the AC Nielsen reports, and there was a huge gap between actual sales and what the research was projecting the sales should be. And people kept saying to me, don't worry about it. It's research error. It's always been there. Don't worry about it. Well, but I was curious and I was worried, and I thought about it, and I noticed it was getting bigger. The gap was getting bigger. So one day I called up the product manager and I said, hey man, I'm going to take you out for lunch. He said, great. He said, but before we go to lunch, we're going to park outside a schoolyard. And he's like, people get arrested for that.
I was about to say that's a very iffy situation starting off the conversation with.
So I said, don't worry, I won't let you get arrested. It won't take long. So we parked outside the schoolyard just as the bell rang and the kids were let out. And all the kids poured out of school into the yard, and they all had music devices. And I said to them, portable music devices, Walkmans and the not politically correct label for them, ghetto blasters. And I turned to them and I said, teenagers are buying batteries. Nobody is selling batteries to teenagers. That's what's causing the gap because the research is all 18 to 49. It's all adults. You're researching them. Nobody's looking at teenagers. And he just looked at me and he said, well, what do we do about it? And I said, well, I have a friend who owns 5 record stores, and he's willing to do a test market for you. If you'll give him the batteries, he'll sell them. He'll keep track of the records and all the rest of it. So we did a test market in the 5 record stores. The sales, the things flew off the shelves. Couldn't keep them stocked. We took that case study, turned it over to the Salesforce. Salesforce used that case study to go to the national record store chains and sold batteries into the record store chains, opened up a brand new line of distribution, multi-million-dollar line of distribution, because I was curious.
That's an insane story. It started off a little iffy with sitting outside of school, but obviously it paid dividends for both of you, and obviously Energizer.
But that's happened over and over again throughout my career. One of the keys to being a successful entrepreneur is don't accept the status quo and be curious about what's the real reason. In the world of Toyota, you've probably heard about the 5 whys.
Mm-hmm.
If something goes wrong, you ask why 5 times before you actually get to the real reason it went wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And that's another example of curiosity, not willing to just accept the first answer you're told. First answer I was told in that situation was, it's research error. Don't worry about it. It's always been there.
If you weren't curious, you wouldn't have found another avenue to generate that multi-millions of dollars for the company, and show how important it is to look at different markets like teenagers, because they are the future. Like you're trying to embed loyalty as early as possible for
right. And nobody was making the batteries. They had to go into drugstores and grocery stores and all the traditional points of retail in order to buy batteries for their music devices. And where were they congregated? They were at record stores. Now, record stores no longer exist, but the concept, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the keys to being a successful entrepreneur, regardless of the environment you're working in, is be curious.
I think that's a huge key point of being an entrepreneur, not only looking to help people, but curious to know how you can help people, why you want to help people. Being curious, like you said, ask those 5 W's, ask the 5 whys until you get to the real reason, what the heart of the matter. I want to touch, since you have such a wealth of experience in marketing, with entrepreneurs, marketing is important, obviously. You can't have sales if you don't have marketing.
Right.
What advice would you give someone who's just starting with their marketing budget, if you will, or their marketing department, they're their own person? How would you suggest they go about being curious enough to figure out how they should market?
Okay. The most common problem I see when I assess digital marketing programs, when I audit websites, it's not copy, it's not design. Sometimes it's copy is very clever and the design is very pretty. What I'm seeing is an absence of strategy. What happens is that the marketing is, I describe it as being inside out. It's the marketer shouting at customers and telling them how awesome they are. One of the things I'll say when I'm speaking about, website user UX design and effective digital marketing, and it's a bit controversial, I tell people, I want you to stop saying call to action. Yeah, and everybody does what you just did.
I'm shifting of the head, curious, what do you mean?
Wait, what? I've been told I need a call to action by every marketer I've ever met in my entire life, and you're telling me to stop saying call to action? What a call to action is a marketer shouting at a customer and telling them what to do. People don't want to be shouted at. They don't want to be told what to do. The customer is on their journey. Start thinking about your marketing from the outside in. Understand who your customer is. Understand what they're like as a person. Understand what their pain is. What is the problem that they're trying to solve? And then most important, understand the journey that they're on. Because most of the time, it's just a gray blob on the white screen. It's just noise, right? Until something happens. I guess I'm going to have to deal with that. So then what happens in their mind? What happens? What's their thought process? How do they think about this? And this happens whether this is an instantaneously impulse decision or it's a long involved decision involving like a $50,000 car. They go through the same buyer's journey. Now, it can happen very rapidly if they're standing in a grocery store and they happen to glance out of the corner of their eye and they see, well, this is where the cereal is. And do I have cereal at home? I think we're running low on cereal. So they shift into the aisle and they start looking at all of their choices and they go into the consideration phase. Well, what kind of cereal do we need? What do we have at home, et cetera, et cetera. Then they go into the prospecting phase, which is where they're, wow, okay, and normally I buy this brand, but this brand is on sale, and and then they go to the decision phase. What is it and so each one of these phases generates a specific set of questions and obstacles that they need to overcome. If you can map that journey, you can create marketing that's outside in. And I'll tell you another quick story. Working with Sprint, and this was back in the days of long distance calling, and we almost didn't accept the assignment because they were literally losing customers faster than they were gaining customers. And we sponsored some research into loyalty in this sector. And I don't remember any of the details for the research. That's unimportant. But what I do remember is a single sentence that the researcher who specialized in loyalty research said. He said 90% of loyalty problems can be traced to a flawed sales process. That one sentence is what got me really thinking about this and this whole concept of outside in versus inside out. And if you think about your marketing from the outside in, you'll stop saying call to action and you'll start creating pathways. Now, effectively, they're exactly the same thing. But the mindset shift is really important, because when you create a people like you pathway that calls out to subsegments in your audience and lets them say, yeah, this is for you. And they click that learn more button. Two very powerful things have happened. They've told you exactly who they are, and they've given you permission to give them more information. Now, which would you prefer? A customer like that, or somebody you've been shouting at to do something?
A customer who wants to learn more, who's curious to get more information and is buying into the journey.
Right. And when you do that, the purchase decision becomes the next logical step in their journey, not something they've been tricked into doing.
More honest, more compassionate, they become more loyal as well.
More loyal. It's just an authentic way of doing marketing. So these are principles, right? It doesn't matter whether you have a multi-seven-figure budget or you're spending $50,000 or $10,000. These principles can inform you on what you're doing, and it really helps you make decisions. It helps stuff fall off the table. If you really do understand who your customers are and where they are, then you're going to be focusing your marketing efforts there. You're not going to be doing TikTok because your nephew said it was cool.
Very true. Very true. I kind of want to shift gears because you were in the marketing world for so long and helping them create companies create their marketing strategies and find different ways of creating loyalty. What made you decide to switch over to website audits and creating websites for customers?
Well, the reality is, in the digital world, a business only owns two digital assets: their list and their website. Everything else is rented land. And when I looked at websites, probably the most important digital asset that most businesses own is their website, and most of them are terrible. And they're terrible because of this absence of strategy. Like, they regurgitate everything they can think of onto the homepage and expect the poor visitor to figure out what's relevant to them and what's not. Or they pay a boatload of money to a designer who does a beautiful job developing a beautiful website that nobody can quite understand what they're supposed to do with it, right? Mm-hmm. So with all my background in marketing strategy and creating campaigns that, actually work, I thought, well, I wanted to get out of the big agency world and, do something a bit more literally entrepreneurial. And so I had an opportunity to buy a vendor. And so I bought Red 8 Interactive 12 years ago, and actually 14 years ago now that I think about it. And I rejigged the company to focus on websites because I felt that this was a very key and important piece of the digital landscape where my particular skill set could really be valuable. Because the simple reality is, if you stand on a street corner in any city in America and swing a dead cat, you're going to hit a web designer, right? Everybody claims they can make a website. The question you have to ask is, should they? And so that's what we've been doing for the last 12. But we have clients that we've rebuilt their website 3 and 4 times. They've been with us for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And, we're in the middle of planning for 2 large builds that will happen in 2027. One is a bank in the Midwest, and the other is a manufacturer. And they've been our clients for more than 8 years. So, I mean, we've got something that seems to make sense, because we're very clear with folks. I say no a lot. I get calls, we want to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, man, I'd really like to take your money, but that's a really bad idea. And here are the 4 reasons why. And you do that, you build trust, you build relationship, and that lasts. And that's why they've been clients for so long.
I love that. I love how you actually say no to some projects instead of saying yes to everything.
Oh, yeah.
Not just saying no, but you're giving them the values of why you're saying no, so that they could see whether or not it's a great idea to continue.
Let's talk about your audience and entrepreneurs who want to just get started.
Yeah.
As odd as this might sound, more often than not, somebody will call me up, because we also have a product for smaller businesses called Innately. I'll say, no, don't spend money on a website. This is the guy whose business makes websites.
Yeah. A little confused over here, James. You're saying don't build websites, but you build websites. We're looking. This is a little strange.
Yeah, like I said, there's only 2 digital assets that you own: your website and your list. And if you're just getting started, the list is way more important than the website. There are lots of ways to create a digital online presence. You can sign up for a free account at MailChimp and use their landing page as service as your website. Just buy a domain for $10 a year, $15 a year, whatever it costs, and redirect that domain to that landing page. Before you spend money on a website, find some people who are willing to pay for what it is that you want to sell.
It's genius. Simple, straightforward, genius. James, I want to shift into investing in yourself, because you brought it up. What have you found to be probably the best way, or one of the best ways you have invested in yourself? And if you could share a story how that showcased itself.
And you've heard this as we've talked about things. I'm a big fan of doing, and recognizing that everything that I do is not going to be successful. So I think that the key investment you can make in yourself is trust your instincts, and recognize that you're going to make mistakes. Don't try to cover them up. Make a mistake, go, well, I remember a story I was dealing with in Chicago. And I came up with this idea, and I was sharing this idea with my team. And one of the people on my team sort of pointed out some of the flaws in my idea. And I listened to her, and you're right, it probably isn't a very good idea. I said, I'm sorry I wasted your time talking about all of this. And she looked at me and says, don't worry about it. At least you have ideas. And being willing to trust your instincts and being willing to is, I think, probably the most important thing you can do to invest in yourself. And being willing to accept that you're going to make mistakes. The problem is not people who make mistakes. The problem is people who try to cover up the mistakes. because a mistake is a valuable learning opportunity. You start piling crap on top of your mistake to try to make it all go away, and nothing good comes from that.
There's a crap sandwich, pretty much.
Yep. Absolutely. So I think that I think would be the key thing is, there's a famous story about a guy named Peter Lynch who ran the Magellan Fund, which was an investment fund for Fidelity Investment. He did this for years. He was extremely successful. And a business reporter was asking him, "What do you explain your success?" And the reporter was expecting a long and complicated and involved discussion about stocks and all the rest of that stuff, right? And what he said was, water the flowers and prune the weeds.
Simple and genius.
And this is marketing. Marketing is about testing. Marketing is about trying things. Marketing is about, it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What's working, you let it continue to work, and then you experiment on the side and you test and you try to beat the control. And that didn't work. Okay, well, let's wonder why it didn't work. Curiosity. And then, I remember when I was managing the digital budget for Toyota, and they were spending all kinds of time and energy with the media team, like fine-tuning things and doing like 1% improvements and 2% improvements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. But where are people going when they actually click on one of these things? Oh, I don't know. They're going over there someplace. Look at their landing pages. Has anyone looked at the landing pages? So we went and looked at the landing pages. They were terrible. So I said, well, you guys carry on with your 1% and 2% things. We're going to go fix the landing pages. Investing in landing pages and challenging the status quo around those landing pages saw a 60% improvement in conversion rates.
Those are numbers that any business loves to hear.
Just trust your instincts and be curious and, recognize that the status quo doesn't necessarily mean you want to stop it, but you always want to challenge it.
I love it. James, we are coming to the end of the episode, which I hate because I'm having a great time chatting with you and I'm getting so much. I'm honestly looking forward to reading the transcript of this episode and picking out all the golden nuggets that I missed. But I would love to know, I have your 10-year-old self here. What single piece of advice you would love to hand back to your 10-year-old self?
I tell you, if I could have told my 10-year-old self anything, it would be, don't try to boil the ocean. So many people spend so much time trying to do so many things when the reality is you're much better off concentrating on a few things. And when you're young, you think you can take on the whole damn world, and you can't. Because there's things you can control and there's most things you can't control. So if I were to tell my younger self anything, it would be, stop trying to boil the ocean. And the other, can I have two things?
You can have two other things if you would like.
Okay. The other thing that I learned early in my career, which really held me in good stead, and I spent a lot of time training folks around this, was stop talking. Another way I sometimes express this is take yes for an answer.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this when people were working with clients, and the account is talking, and there's silence, and then they start talking. I said, no, stop talking. Because if you're talking, you're not listening. And silence isn't necessarily a bad thing, because silence usually means that whoever you're working with is thinking about something. Let them do that, and then let them talk, and you'll learn what they understand, what they don't understand. And you'll learn how to present your idea in a way that resonates with them, that supports the journey that's going on in their head. You can't do that if you're talking.
Great advice. And a piece of advice that I love, especially the science part, because that's key to when you're in an interview. You ask your question, you just wait for them to give the answer, and you get such more heartfelt answers after the initial foray of their answer. James, I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to let my audience know where they can find you, follow you, anything you would like to pitch to them. This is your time as a thank you for being on the show. So the floor is yours.
Well, I'd love to. I love helping people. I just had coffee earlier today with an old friend of mine who's like, they said, "Why are you still doing this?" And I said, "Because I still gain great joy and satisfaction out of helping people and helping business owners, use marketing to create value for their customers as well as value for themselves." It's a reality. You can't just work in isolation. People have got to know about what's awesome about you. So if somebody wants to talk to me about this, if they go to vipchatwithjames.com, they can book 30 minutes on my calendar and we can talk about websites, we can talk about customers, we can talk about strategy, we can talk about how AI is influencing marketing and how customer avatars and journey maps can really, really, really make a difference to how effectively they can present themselves in the real world of digital marketing. So vipchatwithjames.com, and I would love to hear from you.
Amazing. James, I want to thank you so much for being here. I had a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to being in your network and seeing all the great stuff that you are doing with Invidly and everything else you're at.
Hey, Phil, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope I've been able to share some thoughts and some ideas and stimulate some people to think about their entrepreneurial journey in a creative and curious way.
Oh, you have definitely done that, sir, and more. To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below to get that free chat with James and all his other social medias so you can connect and stay with him. And I thank you very much for listening. And as always, remember to invest in yourself.
Thanks for tuning in. Now it's time to take the next step. When you're ready to dive deeper into how to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, Phil's got something special for you. Join him for a free webinar where he'll reveal the 3 secrets that have helped countless entrepreneurs succeed in podcasting. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot, and let's turn your podcasting dreams into reality.